Good morning, good evening, good middle of the night
Hey.
for everyone who's joining us. This is the sixth episode of Slow Walk, and I am one of your hosts, Michael Hebb, the founder of EOL.community and Death Over Dinner, and I am joined by my dear friend Deanna Cochran, who is an extraordinary leader in the end of life space. And I'm going to turn it over to Deanna, and she's going to say hello and introduce us to our remarkable guest.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. We're really gaining momentum with Slow Walk, and we're so thrilled to bring people like Kirsten Deleo. And there's so much she's going to share with us today, not just concepts, but things we can do. Her work is powerful, and she's been doing it for 25 years throughout the world, training healthcare practitioners in compassionate care. The organization is Authentic Presence. I'll let her tell you. I think you created. I'm not sure. I think you're the founder of that. But just this beautiful work. She has this a book that actually anybody who wants to care at the bedside, it will make you feel empowered and more confident and in the gentle approach. And I cannot wait for you to hear what she has to say. Welcome, Kirsten. There's so
Hi.
many ways that you could start. What would you like to get us going in?
Yeah. I'm really happy to be there here in this virtual space
Yes.
with everybody and Michael and Dana. Thank you for having me on your show. It's very exciting and learning about your collective. That's great. Yeah, I'm actually literally sitting in the middle of a storm here. I'm on the west coast in Ireland, and we have a gale barreling down. And you plan well, and then life happens. This is how end of life goes. Also, you prepare, you have to prepare, but then there's a moment you have to let go and just literally enter the flow and yeah, trust, isn't it? So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there, okay. So what I'm going to short circuit. This is what I do when I'm so excited. But could you start us with the companion versus caregiving? You have a beautiful way you talk about that and the shadow side of caregiving. Could you start us off with that?
You're the first person who asked this question. This is that's great.
It's an
Um,
awesome question.
yeah, over the years, I found it is so important to show up, to be present as a human being at the bedside or in conversation with somebody who's facing the end of life, to really recognize this shared journey. And it sounds so trite, but it's really true. And when we are caring professionally or as a family caregiver or this caregiving, there is a power dynamic at play just in the word itself, because it is based on there's a person that has to be weaker and another person that's stronger. In one way, that's true, but in a very fundamental way, it is not. We are all whole and okay, and so and also the hand who supports is always higher than the hand who kind of needs support. So I wanted to get away from that power dynamic and just really reflect more the human aspect of the work we are doing. There is a beautiful pearl of wisdom I always go back to by I think this is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. No, Cecily Saunders. She said that at the bedside, you show up with 50% for professional, 50% with your expertise and knowledge, but 50% as a human being.
Mhm.
And this is so important, and that's something we don't support caregivers in, we don't support professionals in all disciplines, but also family caregivers, because there's a tremendous pressure to do well, to do it right.
Mhm.
But the human connection we have with the person, the care, this is really what matters. So companioning or companionship There's a flavor of we're equals in one way as humans. Yes, I may have a bit more experience under my belt, but I'm mortal as well. So that's the tough one, when you're at the bedside to face that, no, I'm looking at my future as well. So companion is like I'm walking alongside the person. I'm right there with them. So this walking alongside for me very beautifully, yeah, captures this journey, and and that we need one another. And this pandemic is such a powerful and equally painful example, but it really shows us the essence of the work. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
And just to, for because we jumped in quick, the
I'm sorry. It was on me. I was so excited. How are you doing today, Kirsten? What's going on?
Besides the gale, I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
No, I think it's a great place to start. And for those of you who jumped on, I saw a few people came in a little bit late after maybe Deanna asked the question. And the question that Deanna was asking Kirsten is a teaching that Kirsten has focused on, which is on the word caregiving and the notion of caregiving, and moving to a notion of a companion, and somebody who is accompanying someone who needs care, or we all need care, but changing that dynamic between caregiver, care receiver to one of companion, which I think is extraordinary and beautiful. But how did you get into this work? I mean, this work chooses so many of us. It doesn't seem like we wake up. Some people do wake up and be like, I'm at work, because they are having their last experience. But what brought you to this work originally?
For me, it was always has been a calling. I heard from I grew up. I was born and raised and grew up in Germany, so my mid-20s. And at the time, hospice or palliative care was in a very, very early stages, and I met some people there wanted to create a hospice, and I was completely naive. I was still studying at university, and I thought, oh, what is that? And then they told me the vision of hospice and palliative care, and I was floored. And there was something within me that I knew this is what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I would enter into, but sometimes this kind of inner knowing. And so I really followed it. I followed that path, joined this hospice group. Some of us, we are still friends after all these years, and now I'm back in Europe, we're connected. And so it was just a gradual, I couldn't have imagined that path. So it was a gradual unfolding. So I just joined hospice volunteering in Germany at the time. Was very clinical. I started in hospitals and in a university hospital with AIDS patients at the time. I was very, very, at the time that was really the main thing for palliative care or hospice. Palliative care actually didn't quite exist yet at that time. And then I was looking for something. I knew that the clinical or medical approach is not it. So I knew there must be a different way of going about this. And I had studied German literature and history, completely different world. So I know that it must be a different way. So because I was already a Buddhist practitioner, a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner. So I searched and I found the Zen Hospice in San Francisco, which was at the time the first Buddhist hospice in the West. So I just, again, in complete, when you're young, you kind of do things. I just called them up and said, can I come? I would like to learn, can I come? And I remember the person on the phone, yeah, we have to do an interview, but we actually don't take interns, and who are you anyway? We don't know you. But then I had the interview and they said, well, you can come for the summer. Why don't you come? And you will be our first intern. So I just packed up and I came. And
What year was
And
this?
then I stayed. Yeah, I stayed, and then I you know continued my own spiritual or contemplative practice, deepened that over the years. Also, I kind of trained in a therapy, psychotherapy, because I felt I need a bit more tools, and then slowly started teaching, became involved in a spiritual care program in the US, which was inspired by the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And now, a few years ago, we asked our students because that was a program in contemplative end of life care. That was the first in the US, and we started with the Naropa University.
Mhm.
And so and at the time we called it contemplative end of life care, and nobody could remember that name.
Yeah.
Even after 10 years, you saw Diana struggling with that, and is that we have to ask our students. So we asked our students from 10 years and said, what are your main takeaways from this training? And they said authentic presence. And that was what we, oh, here we go, authentic presence. So about, I think now 4 years ago, we renamed the program and called it authentic presence. So because that's the essence of contemplative end of life care, just accompanying people.
Yeah. Michael was asking, you missed it, when was that, when you were in San Francisco, when you were going into the Zen project?
Oh, let's see. That was end of the 90s, end 90s. So it was right after the AIDS pandemic in San Francisco. And I started volunteering there, and I've worked there for many years. And it's at the time was such a tight-knit community, and still friends with many people. Sadly, they had to close their doors a number of years ago. But they're now in a different manifestation, mostly a kind of educational
Yep.
and training programs.
Well, I'd love to know about those early days. So was Frank Ostaseski still there?
Yeah, it was with Frank Ostaseski, one of the pioneers with Frank. And he had a great team, a really good, really solid people with good hearts, these big-hearted people, because this work really needs big-hearted people who are just doing it. And I learned from them. And at the time, they had in San Francisco on Page Street, they had an old Victorian, which they had remodeled into four-bed residence. I think it was 4-bed at the time, 3-bed or one shared bedroom. And then they also trained people for Laguna Honda. Laguna Honda it was at the time one of the biggest nursing hospitals with open wards. The only one still left was open wards with 28 beds to one big room. So the hospice in that care facility was 28 beds in one room. And this is where I learned. This is where I really learned. And I learned, I must say, the most from the CNAs, who were there just right there with the patients, with the guests, sitting and just treating them like a family member. And this place, because, there was such a diverse group of people who found themselves at the very last days or weeks, or there were patients there for a year or 2 or 3. They found themselves there. So some people came from Japantown or Chinatown, the Hispanic neighborhoods, white people, all colors, all tradition, all faith tradition or none. And they were all kind of thrown together in this one room. And it was beautiful. And I still remember when they told me, they asked me if I would be willing to work there. And I was a bit shocked. I was brand new. And I thought, well, I don't know if I have the skills or the stamina to walk into a room where I know I'm meeting 28 people who are dying. In one, I was scared. I was really scared. So, but then through the presence of the nurses, the nursing staff, they've been working there for years and years and years. That shows you something of the commitment and really it's devotion, really the devotion to the work. And the attending physician was just marvelous, and and the volunteer coordinator, Eric, he was just really such a jewel, and they took me under the wings, and this is where I learned, just being present with people, and yeah, just sitting at the bedside and with complete strangers, and knowing actually we have so much in common, and yes, there are distinct differences, and
Yeah.
but seeing the depth of humanity,
Yeah.
and the love, was incredible. It was really incredible.
What a beginning.
Yeah.
What a beginning.
Yeah. Compared to Germany, where it was clinical, I went through the training in Germany, and I couldn't see a single person. They didn't allow you.
Right.
You first had to graduate, and then it was very academic, and I just said, this is not the way to do it. You don't want to sit at the bedside with clothes on. This is not the way to go about this.
Well, and we're still like that in many ways. The transition is happening, absolutely, and we're still facing that clinical approach. And I feel like that's why the huge grassroots movement, if you want to call it a movement, the huge grassroots people chipping in and saying, yeah, I want to help change this to a more human experience. Like you have a lot of people coming in that your program and your offerings is going to feed the hungry. People are so hungry for this.
It's interesting that you say that, and it would be also good to hear your take, because I feel like over the years when I started, hospice was really booming. It was pioneer work, and these pioneers are now retiring, and I have good friends and colleagues. There's some of them heartbroken because they're seeing, oh, we might lose some of the progress we made over the years because things become medicalized again, institutionalized. Where's the heart of hospice? And that spirit is, and it's different now. It's different, and maybe we just have to adjust and not be too sentimental or too. But there is something at the heart not to get lost. I think, yeah. So I'm wondering.
Remember Barbara Carnes. So Barbara Carnes was one of our big nurse pioneers getting out there. Well, I spoke to her at one of the conferences before COVID, and she was telling me, because she was right there in the beginning with hospice, all those years ago in the 70s. And she said, Diana, the doulas, because my whole big thing 20 years has been being part of this doula growth. And she said, you doulas are bringing back that heart that we had in the beginning, and we could. And what's happened since Medicare took over hospice in the 80s, right? And where we are now, it's just we're getting so much work and fewer people staying in because there's so much work to, like, it's just retirement time. The times are different with funding. We're getting squeezed. The professionals we're working are getting squeezed. So I agree with you. That's what I've been hearing the last 10 years. And doulas will replenish and are rejuvenating. And hospices are bringing doulas into their hospice, they're innovative ones. And I feel the doulas, because most of them they're community doulas, and they're focused on not only accompanying and empowering families, but also being there to help the hospices too, not take the place, but really help. So I'm very hopeful that doulas are going to be called on more by hospices.
Yeah, that's kind of an educational thing you really embarked on, just to really pioneer the work of the doula and what doulas can be. When I was reflecting on our, when I said, oh, what's one of the main messages is really just we really reclaim the dying part of how we care for one another.
Yes.
And the doulas play a huge role and will play a huge role in that. So it's not that the dying is not foreign, that I really would love to see a mainstream education. Imagine if you would have a, a kind of end of life care in schools, in universities,
Yes.
appropriate to the age, and in unpacking it and talking about it. Um, because I see also young volunteers, they're really open. I'm here um, now helping to with the development of a spiritual care center here in Ireland, and there are so many young people coming, really wanting to learn, and they are not, yeah, some of them they have medical backgrounds, but some of them they just know they just want to do some service, that's that call to service and changing something. um, yeah, so that's, if that would be my dream and hope, to
Yeah.
support that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of the changes that I'm seeing, I think that
Mm.
there is certainly, and there should be some apprehension about some of the pioneers retiring, passing the baton and the torch,
Mm.
and to whom and how. And when you see such an institution like Zen Hospice not being able to keep its doors open and having to transform how it works, and the work that it does in the world, it's hard to see, and to see that hospices do struggle and have to close doors, and then there is the presence of more of corporate interest and private equity in hospice, and all of these things should be noted, and are concerning. What I'm also seeing is a real growth and expansion around chaplaincy,
Mhm.
and that um, there is a much deeper education that seems to be happening around end of life and authentic presence, and the work being done by the Chaplaincy Innovation Lab and
Mm.
the Zen Center for Contemplative Care in New York, and their chaplaincy fellowship. So that's one point where I see that there is significant change happening, and
Mhm.
hospitals and healthcare systems are beginning to change, and be more, acknowledge the fact that we do die, we,
Yeah.
but it's
Mm.
maybe not a failure, but maybe something to know and to embrace. And I mean, with Death Over Dinner, to see that we work with the clinic, we work with Memorial Sloan Kettering, and 10 years ago, that wouldn't have, or even 5 years ago, that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
So I think that this pioneering work, has started to really change at a mainstream.
Yeah, it's very encouraging to hear, because Death Over Dinner or death cafes, it's mainstream now. It's
Yeah.
a social, it's a social movement. So this is a tremendous strength in that, isn't it? Yeah.
This is so timely. It's just so timely. It gives me faith in the universe, the spirit world, whatever, because I'm just going to go with Doula World. Doula World started building up when I started early on in the early 2000s. There no doulas, right? Nothing. But people started coming little by little all over the world, calling themselves different things, and little by little it just started growing and growing and growing, and now it's a huge, it kind of exploded about 4 years ago. And it's interesting that this is taking off and getting solid before everyone completely retires, while hospices are struggling. It's like it was built, and now that it's like we came, and now we're seeing where we can be plugged in. When the NHPCO invited us to have a council, an end of life doula advisory council, I've spent the last 2.5 years, I just stepped down as chair in December, but we spent the last 2.5 years developing a strategy and plan to teach the 6,000 hospice member organizations and palliative care organizations about how to utilize end of life doulas in their service, so we can help support them as well. So it feels like I know it's sad and it's hard, and the changing of the baton, let's see how that goes. But at least doulas are in NHPCO awareness, and hospices can start learning and utilize this if it's possible. We want to. We want to.
Yeah, I think the doula movement as a social movement, also with the chaplains, because the chaplains are
Yes.
trained, clinical pastoral care providers are trained in presence.
Yes.
There's also a strong movement now. A few years ago, we had a handful of Buddhist chaplains. Now there are hundreds of them. In Europe, we are trying to form a Buddhist chaplaincy network, all new. So there is a recognition. That's beautiful, and I can see that in our trainings in authentic presence, because we are having a very open and multidisciplinary approach, if you will. So it's not just for chaplains or not just for one professional group, but for everybody involved in care, which is also important. So there are the nurses, the doctors, the therapists, the volunteers, the coordinators, the social worker, anybody involved in care. Also we have funeral directors. We get veterinarians, just community workers, priests, nuns, all faith tradition as well. So there is an incredible openness, and to also see that we need that sense of community and the broadness of experience and knowledge to support people. Because because as you well know, when somebody is dying, it's good that we have a team and a care team around the person. They're well trained and at ease to be present. Because sometimes the person who's dying will open up, to somebody who doesn't wear the hat or the of a chaplain, but it's just a person who has a kind of a tender smile and has just a few minutes time, and this is the person they want to open up, and there is no time for referral, and this is the right person. So everybody on the team needs to be trained in how to be present, or in also spiritual care, what we call the spiritual care, the deeper needs. Maybe not everybody would refer to spiritual, but this human existential needs.
Kirsten, if I can, Michael, did I interrupt? Were you going to have a question, Michael?
But you go for it.
Okay. One of the things that I would love for you to explain to people, because I use it in my program all the time, and I, of course, always credit y'all, is because we too have lots of healthcare professionals, lots of experienced hospice professionals are in my program, which makes me realize, because they always feel so transformed, that I think every, even hospice, they need support too, to stay in that contemplative space and to get support for their own heart. And so I use what you all taught me, good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end, as helping to structure our sessions. Now, I know you're not thinking of it that way, but could you tell us the broader good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end?
So can I kind of step back a little
Absolutely.
bit? Absolutely.
I'm sure there's lots to go before you get there.
So when we talk about, it's a whole team of people teaching authentic presence, and when we talk about contemplative end of life care, what we mean is, with contemplative we embrace awareness and the deep knowledge and recognition that we all have a spiritual essence. We all have deep inner resources, and it's a matter of can we access them, and how can we facilitate the process of helping somebody to get in touch with these inner resources. So contemplative care is about the practitioners, the companion. And companion is here for anybody who is supporting a dying person at the end of life. That their care is informed by their own contemplative practice, may it be prayer, meditation, reflection, a kind of deep reflective understanding of how, and spiritual understanding, how you see the world. So what we do in the training, we bring in very basic, but at the same time very profound Buddhist principles. I was taught, and or most of our faculty members are Buddhist practitioners. Not everybody, or they're Christian contemplatives, So there is a crossover. But these principles to how to embody them, because they really can help us to be there, to show up. And the one you were just referring to is the mindfulness of how do we begin things, how do we set our intention. That's the good in beginning. How do we start? Not just rushing in, also take a moment as we start to pause and let go of our agenda and really connect with our good hearts. So that's the good in beginning. And we can do that anytime, for anything. As you said, for a work meeting, for a day, when I see a guest or a patient, or when I make a phone call to a family member. So that's good in the beginning. It's clear, and a compassionate intention in the beginning. And then in the middle is this the activity, right? That might be the conversation, the meeting, the being present for the person. And in the middle, we often get lost, isn't it? That's where it gets busyness, activity, and at the end, we just don't know what happened. So good in the middle is the commitment to stay connected to our motivation, to our intention. And also to recognize that I'm fundamentally okay, or have fundamental goodness, as we would say in Buddhism, but the person across from me as well. So to always come from that understanding and view, this really deep view of who we are as people, as human beings. So I don't have to rush in and rescue the person. So I can relax a bit more. So that's the kind of frame of mind that one teacher has compared it to a Teflon pan. Yeah, and the good in the middle, whatever kind of is thrown into your path, whatever you're dealing with, you just don't react. It's like a Teflon pan, everything kind of glides away, nothing sticks. So you have always an open and ready mind, a flexible mind. And then good at the end, to really consciously, mindfully conclude things well, to really kind of dedicate it, or can imagine we offer it up. So may that encounter or that conversation really benefit that person. Yeah. So just take a moment to really take a pause and conclude things well internally, mentally. Yeah. So we also, if something was difficult, we are not taking it into the next situation, because that happens, right? At the end of the day, you just have these burdens, and it's hard. And so you continuously let go, and then engage in the next, and then start with the good in the beginning again. That's a very basic Buddhist principle or contemplative practice from the Buddhist tradition. You would apply to your meditation practice. But it equally applies to everything in life. There is always a beginning, always a middle, and always an end. So it's just to remember it. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So that,
yeah. And it applies to so many things.
Exactly.
That side. From reading your book, it seems like you had a pretty remarkable early teacher in end-of-life care, that being your grandmother and your grandfather. I'm wondering if you can tell people who haven't read your book, and those that have, to hear it again or hear it in how you think about it now. That's such a striking story.
Yeah, both my grandparents, they're very, thank you for saying that. They were really remarkable, and they're still with me. These people love you. They fill you up for the rest of your life. The love, that doesn't go away. So this is such a great gift. Beautiful, profound gift. So when my grandfather was dying, so my parents were married for more than 70 years. It's hard to imagine. And so when my grandfather died, He died at home on a Sunday lunchtime. My grandmother was making lunch in the kitchen, and she had called me a few days before he died, and so I was living in San Francisco at the time, so I just hopped on the next plane, literally within 3 hours, and was there 3 days before he died, and we took care of him. And one of my cousins, she's a hospice nurse, so we did it together as a family. The family gathered around him, and she knew my work at the time already, end of life care, caring for people. And then she took me aside and said, okay, so how do I say goodbye? And she completely caught me off guard. How do you say goodbye? And so I shared what I've learned, just share your love. Also share maybe things that the difficult bits, because they went through the war, refugees, and all that, bringing up 2 sons alone for a bit when, during the war. And then also let him know that he can go. So we did that. I'm really composed now, but we did that with a lot of tears and laughter and crying. And then I remember she kind of pulled herself together and then went into the bedroom, sat on his bed, and just did it. She just did it. And my grandfather listened, and he couldn't speak at that time anymore, but you could see there, he was fully there and present to what she shared with him. So, and then he died. He died a few hours later. There was a family present, and we kept him at home for another night. She didn't want to let him go. She said, so we ended up, I stayed with them. And as a child, I always shared their bed. I was always in the middle, of the 2 mattresses, sleeping in the middle. So, and we did the same with his corpse. And that's hard to imagine, but for my grandmother was the most natural thing. She's seen so much death in her life. And so for her, like, yeah, grandpa is still around. He is wearing his Sunday best. It's unusual in his suit in his bed, but he's still present. And so we were lying together, and she realized, oh, this life period of my life is ending. What do I do now? So with him present in the early morning hours, she was realizing, oh, I have to plan my life now alone. So she kept talking about this. I mean, for me, that was incredible, this gift, just to see that clear-mindedness, and still the love that was there, and how natural it was, how normal. So she really taught me, you don't have to be afraid. It doesn't have to be clinical, and it's natural. And and so the next morning, the undertaker came, and she could say goodbye. She just needed that one more night, after so many years. And it was incredible that she shared it with me. So yeah, it was incredible gift.
So beautiful. Really underscores, I think, a line that I read in your book, daring to be present.
Yeah.
What a courageous thing. We're so afraid. Mm-hmm. Death and bodies, mm-hmm. our own and others.
Yeah. Hearing your beautiful story, Kirsten, so many people come into wanting to serve through however means and be present, whatever, wherever. And it usually is people in their lives that they love that inspires them. And sometimes people feel, well, is that enough? Should I be medical? I was like, no. Don't study medical to be here with this. This is the opposite of what even medical wants. Medical wants more of this. This beautiful, beautiful, inspired stories is enough. Yes.
But also, Diana, I also feel like that the healthcare professional also need encouragement, that they can show up as themselves.
Yes.
as a human being. That's very important. Because I train a lot of professionals, and that they can bring, you can bring your wise and tender good heart to the situation. You know, this is also, this will nourish you. It is darn scary, and you will feel completely naked at times, not always, but you will find a strength in it. You really will find a strength in it. And because the burnout happens when we kind of push it away, when we try to guard ourselves, when we try to to be somebody, you know, when I try to be an expert, or things go really wrong. Yeah. When I just try and effort too much, you know. So there is a way to bring in experience and expertise and knowledge, and there is also, and there needs to be room and space for being human, and for that connection is so important. And one of our my colleagues and faculty members, she is a palliative care physician in pediatrics. So she works with children who are dying and their parents. I cannot imagine anything tougher. And I shadowed her a number of times just to see how does she do that. This depth of suffering, the depth of loss. And I must tell you, this was the most amazing time I was able to spend with her, just shadowing her as she talked. And she also teaches residents, she teaches, you know, trains physicians, how she, through her way of engaging with the parents and with the children and the teenagers, she teaches them so much through presence. And she realized actually presence as a skill, is really a skill we can train, as a muscle we can train in. And so it's another skill, maybe the most fundamental skill in caring, in the art of caregiving, art of caring for one another. And it's a skill we can train through mindfulness, awareness. Yeah, so that we kind of be grounded in our own being and be okay.
I mean, one of the things that has resonated with me in your writing and speaking is that people really do fear saying the right or the wrong thing. And even as caregivers, but certainly as daughters, sons, parents, you name it, whatever our relationship is, when we think about the bedside and somebody dying, one of the big and primary fears comes up of like, what if I say the wrong thing, or I must say the right thing? I've got to clean up a whole life within a few minutes or hours or days. And you really emphasize that it's not about the words, the specific words, it's about a state of being. I wonder if you could speak about that.
Sorry, the storm is picking up. Do you hear the gale? No?
No?
Yeah, I'm great. I feel like I'm sitting in the middle of the storm. Yeah, it's this fear, and this, what you're saying is rooted, this fear, I'm not enough. And then I'm not good enough. Not only I'm not enough, I'm not also good enough. So then we kind of make up to all kinds of things, you know, saying too much, you know, or not saying anything, you know, or we regressing in this kind of solemn silence, or we chatter away, or we fluff up the cushion one more time, you know, just to make sure, or we feed the poor person who doesn't want to eat, you know, we do all kinds of things, you know. We busy ourselves, and it's human. I think it's deeply human, and it's I don't want to judge it. I've done it myself. It's just a matter of noticing and say, this is why I'm doing this. I feel uncomfortable. I'm afraid of the pain, or you know, and I really want that the person is okay. And there's fundamentally, I cannot make it okay. Yeah, and to sit with that, to be with that. I cannot make this go away. There is no way I can also reach the depth of their suffering and experience of letting go of this love, of having to say goodbye. There's no way. the only thing, really the thing I can do is being there and holding the space and listening. So actually, our presence is what matters. So it's not what we say or do necessarily, but how we are. This is how I was trained, is how you are matters, because our authenticity speaks and through our presence. You know? Our presence communicates how the degree of comfort I'm a comfort, or how comfortable am I around somebody who's seriously ill, who has a cancer diagnosis, who is dying, or is it, any way of fashion of suffering. It kind of shows up in how I am with the person. And this discomfort, we can feel it, right, in ourselves sometimes, this inner restlessness. Sometimes we can also feel the speediness and the snarling, or sometimes of sheer groundlessness, and despair. And this, I really feel, gives us an insight into the world of the person, of the other person. Imagine what they might be feeling. It's just the peak or the tip of the iceberg of maybe what the other person is feeling. So I can use what maybe sometimes shows up within myself. I can use that as a connection. So instead of completely despairing, I can really, really use it as a connection, form a bridge to the person in front of me.
Beautiful. I love that you said it that way.
Yeah.
It's our humanity is building a connection with them, even though we haven't experienced that yet.
Yeah.
But a tiny piece of our suffering can be that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Love.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean it gets easier. Maybe what gets easier is that you're comfortable with the discomfort.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of, okay, I know this one.
Yeah.
And I can rest, I can relax. And I don't have to go the route, I'm not good enough, or what should I be saying. And I experienced, just the other day, somebody was calling me and said their best friend is dying. It's also, what do I say? I have to make this phone call. She was dreading this phone call. She loves her to bits, but I'm so scared. I just don't know what to say. What would you say if you wouldn't know the diagnosis? What has changed? What has really, really changed? She's still a human being, a person, your best friend. So start there. Just start there. Because then, with the terminal diagnosis, we label people. They become projects. And that's very painful for everybody, and especially for the person.
It's a beautiful reminder. And I love this idea of the empathy bridge almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I'm thinking of right now is it's reminding me of Just Another You. And then I saw that you had that in your book, Just Another You. That was one of the most painful things I think I did in our contemplative retreat. I met Kirsten in 2014 at the 10-day retreat they used to have in New York, in the hills of New York. But would you describe that? That was incredible.
Yeah, so in that very essential, I also want to understand why that was painful. In this reflection, you see the person you're caring for, the person in your care, as another human being, just like you. Just like you, the person has fears and hopes and dreams. And just like you, the person really doesn't want to be sick, really doesn't want to die, doesn't want to suffer, just like you. So we are connecting on this very deep emotional level with the person, and just melting away the barriers we put up. So what was it? What in your experience? Because at that time you were a hospice nurse for many years.
Yeah. Hey, I was just doing another round with the doula. So many times you stop and start and stop and start. But it was because the melting of the barrier. I was trying to remember why, because I remember that connection to the pain that we put a barrier to. Like I didn't realize because I did that. I've always been a believer in getting healing and going to therapy, and I've had very good support since my early 20s, healing path. So I was surprised. It floored me that I had this, pain that I had tucked away. That powerful exercise opened me and showed that to me.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought I had already dealt with that. I mean, not that I didn't think I had more to do, but it was profound. So simple but profound.
Mhm.
What are some of um, the easier jewels or gems around
Yeah, let's start.
um, staying present, um,
Mhm. Mhm.
when you're at the bedside, when you notice your discomfort. But yeah, I would love
Mhm.
some, you know, to
Yeah,
Deanna's point, but also like, what are some of those
yeah,
key reminders for you that you use as a resource?
yeah. Some of the keystones are so simple that we completely overlook them, and they're right there in the present moment. Because what we do when we get anxious, we kind of race towards a future that hasn't happened yet. So the first thing is actually literally to get our busy minds back into our bodies and ground ourselves. Yeah, just to really, okay, through a deep breath, just very deep breathing, just that the breath is always in the present moment. So that's the first step, to bring our busy monkey minds back into our body, to the breath. And the breath connects us to the present moment. And we can then kind of to really see what's really is going on. And then giving our thoughts, okay, whatever we hold, whatever we experience, a bit more space. So we are not they're not running the show. Um, but we are more aware. So just, and then with a deep breath, then again reconnecting with our intention of really being to be there for the person, even though we don't quite know how at that very moment, but at least I have the intention. So we bring ourselves back into our body, being mindful of our physical presence. There's one great thing, you just be aware of your feet. Yeah, right, just when you stand or sit, just as a reminder, where are my feet? Bring yourself back to the feet. um, Bring your breath self into the body through the breath, and especially taking longer exhales is that, it's shown now that it really calms the nervous system. Yeah, so it's so simple. And then connect with your good heart. Why are you really there? What is your hope? What's your intention, aspiration? Connect with that, and then begin. Begin freshly. Yeah, and this can just takes doesn't take long. You know, just to do that. And sometimes in a conversation, you may have to do that again and again. There's also a process of slowing down, really slowing down, which is so important when people are so vulnerable and also so raw. Their Our speediness can be so hurtful, or yeah, so that we meet them in the same, yeah, inner as pacing, so we can be really there. So just to, because all our world now is, we are distracted. I can see myself, like, how many times do I look at my phone? Is it really needed? Yes, all this, everything is pulling us out of ourselves. So caring for a dying person really requires, demands, and will challenge us to return to the present moment. This is where everything happens, and everything in our life anyway.
Kirsten, what I often share, one of my tools to keep me where you just said, you so
Mm,
beautifully described, and to remind me, usually I put a ring on whenever I'm going to go be with the family. I'll put a ring or put a bracelet, something I can see. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
wearing long sleeves, I don't wear a bracelet because it get caught up in my sleeve. I really need to be reminded visually. That ring always reminds me to take a deep breath. And I might not remember, but what happens when I take that deep breath is that I am back in my body, back in the room. If I've wandered off, I might not know that I've done that. But when I go, oh, just take a breath and it'll all, things will click again, that you're present again.
Oh,
I
that's great, yeah. And it's so simple, that we know you just
wear a ring.
trained yourself to do a ring. I have something in my pocket, so I'm a touch person. Yeah, we're all different, visual or touch, um, uh, seeing some, we're all different, or auditory. You can train yourself to bring myself back into the present moment.
It's like you said, when we're in session, like say it's a session you're with somebody at a time, um,
Mm.
the good in the middle is where we get lost. We space out, we might get hurt, we might touch a painful place, we might be sad or what we're saying. All kinds of things could be going on. And that's where we get lost. That's what you're teaching is so profound. Yeah.
Well, so a question for you, and this is, I know that there are some doulas in training that are listening, and many more that will listen to the recording. Um, so I'm thinking this from somebody who is a professional companion, but also um, from a family member when we have to show up in that way. If so, we get present when we can, get back in our bodies, um, and I I believe what you are suggesting at that point, but I would love to hear more clarity, is that then we trust the wisdom of what comes through us. And I think that that can be sometimes a little bit different from professional, from a family. But because sometimes when you hear stories about even doulas or chaplains or medical professionals being bedside, they do something intuitively that sounds really kind of crazy or unexpected, or not
Yeah,
in their
yeah,
exact training per se, and that is the thing that's a catalyst. But
yeah, yeah,
it's a little bit tricky, I mean. So I'm curious about your wisdom around trusting
yeah.
ourselves.
But this kind of crazy wisdom, or however you want to describe it, comes because you learn to be comfortable and you trust that, okay, I know something needs to happen, or you go into a situation, this family needs to make peace. They're not talking to each other. I have no idea how to do that. I'm here in a role as chaplain or social worker, or, how do I do this? This is my job, but, you know, uh, and and just to enter that space, or just, yeah, with it, held by your intention. And I really, and I yeah, people I know, they learn there is a magic when we let go of our agenda. I set my attention, so there the agenda is there, but in a very open frame of mind. And then the magic can happen, as you described. So they do something crazy. Maybe I say something, I have no idea where it's coming from, but there is something that comes through me or through you, and that's what needed to be said, or something, and to really trust that inner wisdom to emerge, and also to call on help. So if I'm not be able to do that, to really, I just need help. This is not a journey we can do by ourselves. So it's maybe I'm not the right person in that moment. Maybe somebody else is. It's more appropriate, and I will come back later if I can. So yeah, this the space for magic, a space for miracles. And I tell you, I mean, I know you both been, for years around people who are dying and end of life care, but at that point, even if we some people don't believe in prayers, I really find them very powerful. It's like an SOS. Anybody out there? I need help right now. So that calling in the troops, I call it calling in the troops, because I cannot do this alone. and I don't know what to say or do, but please show me, guide me. And something happens usually. But it happens when we become still, when we kind of pause.
Well, I think that you provide really good wisdom in the book of like sometimes you do something wrong or that's out of alignment or doesn't feel right, and it might have been come through your intuitive sense and you might have been still, and then you can apologize. If something doesn't work, you can still
Yeah.
that doesn't work. I tried something, or like you said in your book, what I'm saying kind of sucks, right? To the person that's dying. And so I think that as long as if people feel resourced with the tool of saying, you can be like, oops. Um,
Yeah, exactly. You can count your oops, but people, that's why I say, yeah, people are so forgiving because they really feel your intention. Of course, I'm not talking about medical things here, I'm talking about really what I just said was, oh, that was not appropriate. Oh, I wish I could eat my words right now, or I come in as expert and I have the greatest question of the world, have them all in my back pocket and I rattle them down my list and I miss the person entirely and say, oh, Kirsten, you did not listen to your own wisdom, did you? And then I apologize. I do say, well, what I just said, that really sucks, or was not helpful, was it? And usually the answer is yes, you're right. But this is the moment of connection when I'm honest and basically just confess in a way, and say, well, ask the person for forgiveness,
I have a little story about that. I'll
Yeah.
fess up. I'll fess up. I was journeying with a woman, 61, who was dying of ovarian cancer. Did not want to die, young, and I was uncomfortable. And I realized later I was uncomfortable because she was the age my mother was. She looked very young, all of that. But in the moment, I didn't realize it. And I was trying to fix her, and I didn't realize it. And she got angry at me. And she got angry at me. She stared. We were talking across the table, and then she stared out the window. And she said, if you keep doing this, you can leave. If you can't sit here with me, you can leave. And I had been around long enough with all my years of hospice and doula. I sat down, I listened, and I immediately knew I was doing something like trying to fix or not being able to hear. And I sat there, like you said, I was stunned. So I needed a minute to say what I was going to say. And I said, please forgive me. Please forgive me. And what she did is she looked at me when I said that. She looked back out the window and then she started talking again. And I spent another 3 hours there. So I knew she did forgive me, or else she would have had me go. But it's like she's the one who broke through my BS. I didn't realize.
Mm-hmm.
So I really advocate for, we have an inner trainer. I call it my inner trainer. Whether you're called out, that's a gift to be called out, because actually now you know what to work with. But inside, when we leave, we're alone. So we have to trust that quiet voice that says, I wish I wouldn't have said that. Or I wish I would have said this. Yeah.
And to say it then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just when I notice it, to actually acknowledge it. And not just, I was thinking, oh, it didn't really happen. No, it did happen. I did say that. Or I was too busy. Yeah. Well, what a great teaching,
Yeah.
You will, you will remember that one.
We can't be afraid. If we're afraid we're, never going to do anything wrong, we'll stay home. We won't go visit. And people need us to be around because one of the big things, as you all know, is that people become afraid sometimes in the close circle and they stop showing up. Because we're afraid of what we're gonna, so we've got to just please have courage and just go, if I mess up, I'm gonna say I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's kind of it. So fear is such a big inhibitor. We're kind of holding back. We're holding also ourselves back. We're never giving ourselves fully or show up, and also with our flaws and joy. As well, aliveness.
Yeah.
And just somebody I think last week I said there is a in German you have two different words for mistake and error. In a way, in the same way in English, but no, you may make a mistake, but you cannot be wrong. Yeah, yeah. You make a mistake. You may say something that was not skillful, but with the heartfelt intention, you cannot be wrong. Fundamentally. So I thought that was a really great way of looking at it. If you come with that motivation.
It's amazing. So, where the response to the two of you talking about, well, one talking about the fears of messing up, and then stories of failure.
Yeah,
they're so important to people.
Yeah.
So important to share, and we so often leave them out of our teaching. We forget. We think we want to impart this, these tools, when in fact one of the greatest tool is the fallibility that we all have, because it gives people permission to actually go forth and be and try and notice, and getting them through the gates into the arena.
It could be. This can sound very angelic, or love and light and white, glorious, and it's messy. It's messy, and we're human beings, so it's messy, and that's to be celebrated as well, and with a good sense of humor. And this we do make mistakes, and I was some years ago, a good friend of mine was dying, and now my friends now have been a Buddhist practitioner for a few decades, and I should know my stuff, but at that point I wasn't skillful. I was somehow distracted, and this good friend, she looked at me, Kirsten, I think you better sit some more now. Just sit down. And then not to take it personal, the way you did, Diana. Just take it as a teaching. Wow, you really taught. Yes, okay, I better sit down. Collect myself, and so it's just to really treasure that, and that they hurt in a moment. They hurt, it's like, oh, because there's a truth, isn't it? And but these failures is also to learn from them, and not because they help us. They really help us.
We have a question from Stuart Cable that came in.
Yeah.
Stuart asks, do you think our awareness practice should give attention to our own death? Or could this distract our focus on how to want things to be for ourselves, rather than listening or sensing deeply what is important to the person?
You said own death, yeah? Mm-hmm.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we haven't touched upon this yet, and this is such a fundamental thing, that caring for the dying is always being with our own dying, isn't it? There's no way of skirting the issue. There's no way of running away from it, actually, or we burn out. That's so it's an invitation, it's a challenge to make peace or lean into our own mortality and vulnerability. I remember when I started out, because I started young. When you're young, you think you live forever, and it hit me years later, after so many deaths, that I'm looking at my future, and I was literally shocked. I was shocked that it hadn't occurred to me. It had not occurred to me. I was like, wow, what? The denial is so strong, and even after years, I caught myself saying, yeah, if I die, not when I die. That was shocking to me, to be aware, wow, that denial and the fear of death is so strong, and trying to protect myself from the reality that I will die too, and death is real. So it really, so that was a real wake-up call. So it really just, and then through So be so kind of easily talk about making friends with death, but friend, how can death be a friend, perhaps a different way of looking to lean into it, to allow it to come closer into our lives, to consider it. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we have a daily contemplation I start out every day, so kind of reminding myself death is real, it comes without warning. This body will be a corpse. So that's kind of okay, make it real. How do I spend my time? What is really important? So, and that's also the work, the inner work of end of life work, of that we kind of find ways of leaning into what we fear, and not to run away, and also saying it's not a process that ends. Because also I recognize over the years there's a tendency to become an expert, the way you introduced me, you've been around, and you too, Dan, for 20 years, 30 years, and you know what you're doing. I find it really a slippery slope, this expert being, or expertdom, it's a dangerous territory, because as soon as I put these blinders, I'm not connected, it's a shield. And so to allow this vulnerability, allow it to be there, and the fear to be there, yes, over the years we can grow more comfortable, and also I prepare myself, but it's work, it's inner work, and it doesn't stop. It doesn't end, until my last breath. It's work I have to do. So yeah,
I think it's a beautiful question.
Yeah.
Yes, and I mean, it brings up a couple of things for me. One, there's the study that was done with therapists, and to determine that those that had a mindfulness practice or underwent a mindfulness practice, without changing anything else in the way that they worked with their patients, the lives of their patients improved and their healing improved. And I think very much with those of us that are working in the end of life space, the more that we can improve our comfort around our own death, our patients, our companions, the people that are around, they will have an improved experience because of our comfort level.
Yeah.
I found that true when I had a half sister die recently, and she was 85. My father was quite old when I was born, and we weren't that close, and we hadn't seen each other in maybe 10 years, and we kind of didn't like each other that much also. And there are a lot of family tensions and all of these things, and we've had some beautiful moments together. And she was on her deathbed, and my other sister was here and was like, "You should come with me to see Arden." And I was like, I don't think Arden wants to see me, and I don't know if it's the right, and then I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, this is the work that you do, and like, just get in the car, and it'll be clear if Arden doesn't want you there, and you'll get out of the room." The joy that overcame her in seeing me and my presence, and just like the brightening of her soul and my own in that moment. And what I realized was, once I got there, because I've done a lot of work around my own death, I was able to be just present to the beauty of it. And I think that without that comfort level, Stuart, without that work, facing our own, we miss a lot of things. We're triggered a lot, but we also miss the opportunity to be present to beauty.
Yeah. It's so true, Michael. It's so true. It's a gift we also keeps giving. Kind of, you bring that comfort or level of okayness, and the person, your sister, felt it, and people were at the last period of their life, they're so sensitive. They can feel what you bring into the room. Are you uncomfortable? Are you okay? You might be uncomfortable, but you're okay with being uncomfortable. They feel that with just, you know, as we open the door and walk into the room, how we hold our bodies, how we sit down, how we will look at them, or how we avoid their gaze. You know, we think we can fake it. No. So what a great gift that you just did it, and your sister just to be there, and what a beautiful surprise, no, isn't it? Just that connection. Yeah.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing that. Gorgeous.
And one of the things that was so beautiful is there was, you know, this childlike quality that people often talk about. This like innocence and almost like excited child that you didn't see in my sister, but there it was in her last stage. And she was so delighted. She, like, when somebody would touch her face, she was so delighted, and this was a woman who would always be like, no hugs, no touching, right? So yeah. To be present to that experience of her, and it's not, you know, that's not always the case. Sometimes you're there at the end and it can be really destabilizing, but it was a really beautiful experience.
And then to have witnessed that, and that's the last memory of her, right? So yeah, but people can, not everybody, but people can go through profound changes. Their whole personality. I remember when my mom died, you know, she had not an easy life, but at the last days of her life, she just completely let go. She could relax, and she said, oh, now I actually know I'm dying. I don't have to feel it anymore. You know, and what a bird. She just, oh, I know it's happening, so it's okay.
Wow.
And just how much we carry.
Yeah, we have to be to live in this world. We have to create a way to deal with the what is. And Michael's story of your half sister really shows me that, and also your mom, what you just said right now, and my mom too, she did that. There's something when you don't have to do that anymore. That's why, you know, all the people I've accompanied also, you get to see that. It's an honor, it's a privilege to get to see this, where they're not carrying all that anymore. And there's a very, not everybody is positive, but it's, you know, it's amazing, and it's a privilege, and it's life changing when it's your family. You get to have that with your family.
Yeah, and you said something, Michael, in your description of your sister, this sense of childlike innocence, and that's a quality we can bring into our work as well. And when I say work, it's kind of the caring or the service, you know, aspect, being present. That curiosity, the innocence, that openness, and being curious about the other person, because we just keep labeling each other, you know, especially in family, and we have dynamics are happening for centuries, and here that somebody's one family member is dying, and everything is magnified, isn't it? And comes to the forefront, the good bits and the tough bits, and but allowing the person also to be themselves and discovering them. No, maybe I don't know you fully. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the playfulness. There's a playfulness.
Yeah.
You know, that as people who are coming to visit, sometimes we come like funeral directors. We need to be somber and just serious because this is serious. This is sad. Well, I can tell you so many times I've got to be part of, because I was in there somber thinking I needed, okay. But actually I'm thinking of caregivers right now, this primary caregiver, how much that they want to play sometimes and nobody's playing with them. You know, I'll never forget one woman. It was just terrible situation with her husband, and he was dying and he fell. So I go over there, I get there, and so we had to call the fire department because I couldn't pick him up either. So when the firemen came, they were like GQ 6 foot, beautiful men. And one after another walked in, and we were, okay, so I just was going like this. Like, I couldn't believe it. And she just stood there and she looked at me and I looked at her and she said, "Oh my God." She said, "They're beautiful." And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should say yeah, if she was, I didn't know what to do. But when she said, "Oh my God, they're beautiful," then we both just started laughing together. And she's like, oh, and she just kept saying that all night. So it got really helped to release. But I, as a person standing by, I didn't know if it was okay to laugh with her. I was, for a moment, I was like, is that appropriate? And it was. She played. She really enjoyed that.
But laughter is so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
That sense of lightness and connection. Laughter is not about being cynical or sarcastic,
Right.
It's really that connection, and it's very human again. So reckon, oh, this is very human. They're good looking, huh?
Oh my
So
goodness.
it's lovely.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we only have about 7 minutes left. It looks like there one other question came in. Let's see. It's from Celine. It's a bit of a long question. And so, but we'll get through it together. And there's an LOL at the end. So we'll get through to that. Michael's story of his sister's passing and her countenance make me think it really seems like the ego was removed and the true soul and spirit was there in presence. Kindred souls, soul group entities. Michael and his sister, and in that time she remembered that without all the extraneous stuff of life and was just overjoyed that he was there with her being part of a common soul group. Is this something you commonly see in your work? And then I don't know if it's really a pertinent question. LOL. Of course, it's a pertinent question, Celine. We'll actually make it maybe the last question. And what are some of the beautiful things that you see and experience? How has this made your life bigger and brighter doing this work? In response to Celine, and then anything else, Deanna, you have in closing.
No, I'm good.
What I've learned being with dying, with my own and others, is really about love, the capacity of love, and how deep it is, and to really trust that. I grew up in a household where the extent of expressing love was, you don't even say I love you, you say I have love for you. So I remember when I moved to the US and people just freely said I love you. So that but I learned over the years there's this love that's human connection, and this work is really about this big-heartedness, this really big-heartedness, tenderness, and wisdom, and that connection. And when people then shared with you, what a great gift it is, what a beautiful gift, when the last thing they can say, I love you. That's yeah. And or just you see it in their eyes, and what yeah, it's just very moving. But it's also not to always expect that, but to feel the love even for the person you don't understand, to feel that concern, the tenderness. I feel often the tenderness, even so I might not, I just don't understand the other person fully, but there is a connection, what I would call love, and it's so much bigger. So yeah, so for me it's an education of the heart.
Absolutely. These strange hearts of ours, they have to continue to be shattered to grow.
Yes.
That's the truth.
Yeah, it's about, look, you have to let go, and that's the moment when you realize this is what it is, and the next moment you have to let go, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Well, the paradox of it. And to,
Oh, by
to stick with
breaking.
that paradox.
Yeah.
Most of the crying that I've done or the weeping or not sobbing, but in the work and you're touched by people when you do it. Anyway, is always been from the love. When you were talking, Kirsten, it was from not the suffering. I've seen so much suffering, so much sadness, so much unfairness. That didn't make me cry. It was the love that I saw, the tenderness, the reconciliation sometimes. I'm not a natural caregiver. I hate every second of this, but the labor of love. Just it's the love that always touched me all these years. If anything's going to make me cry, and I can be a tough cookie sometimes, it's the love.
Mm.
Yeah.
It seems like a central. We've got 3 minutes left, so I'm going to let you give a pitch for loving kindness.
Mm.
Why should we care about loving kindness? What is it? Seems like a central part of your work. And with that, then we'll bid everyone adieu.
Good. So loving kindness itself, the word is already love and kindness. So this contemplative practice, a meditation practice where you actively generate love and kindness for yourself and the world and everybody in it. And it was taught by the Buddha, so it's not a New Age practice, and it was taught by the Buddha as an antidote to fear, which is very powerful because end of life is so much fear. So it's a practice that works with phrases, and the typical phrases are: "May I be happy, may I be well, may I be safe, may you be happy, may you be well, may you be safe." And there are variations to that, but these are the "may you be happy, may you be well." These are the and then you just sit with these phrases. You kind of send them to yourself, extend a wish to yourself, then people you're close with, people you love, people you don't know so well, and then you gradually open it out to include others, people you don't agree with, people who nag you, people get on your nerves, people you don't agree with politically. So you're really stretching this heart muscle, but you start with yourself, and that's often the toughest part, to embrace yourself with this love and kindness equally. So it just comes from a place of equanimity. So you're opening it up, and this is a powerful practice. Just to, when you notice the self-critical mind is at work, instead of saying "I'm not good enough," "May I be happy, may I be well," just that wish. Or if I'm struggling, I don't know what this person needs, I can just mentally, quietly send them loving kindness. May you be well. But this wellness, that's so much deeper, this deeper inner healing beyond death, and may you really have happiness, the deepest happiness possible.
Beautiful. So clear.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you all. Thank you for this. Has been a beautiful time, Kirsten. Thank you.
Yeah, and we just put Kirsten Deleo's website in the chat. There's a link there. You can find out about authentic presence and her courses, and absolutely get a copy of her book.
Oh yeah,
it's extraordinary. All right, well, we're gonna let everyone waltz on out of here with Slow Walk song, and we'll see you probably next month. We haven't set the date yet, but thanks for being here once again, everyone.
Let's rock and roll together. It's all okay.
All right.
That was great. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Dana.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.